The common story of Operation Anthropoid is that two brave men killed a monster and paid with their lives. That's not wrong, but it misses the strange, uncomfortable truth. The Allied planners in London did not expect the mission to succeed. In fact, they assumed the parachutists would be captured or killed within days. The real purpose of Anthropoid was political, to show the Czech government in exile was doing something. Reinhard Heydrich's death was a bonus, not the primary calculation. The overlooked consequence is that the assassination triggered one of the worst reprisals of the war, but also broke the Czech population's passive acceptance of occupation. Sometimes a tactical failure becomes a strategic turning point, and sometimes the men on the ground succeed despite their own headquarters betting against them. By late 1941, Heydrich had been installed as Deputy Reich Protector, and his nickname, the Butcher of Prague, was earned. He ruled through a system of collective responsibility: kill one German, execute 100 Czechs. Resistance activities, already modest, dropped sharply. The Czech government in exile in London, led by President Edvard Beneš, needed a morale victory, not a military one. Those were impossible against the Reich in 1942, but a symbolic blow. The idea was simple: drop two Czech parachutists trained by the British Special Operations Executive. They would attempt to kill Heydrich. If they succeeded, excellent. If they failed, the Allies would still demonstrate that no Nazi was safe. The men chosen were Jan Kubiš and Josef Gabčík. Kubiš was a former factory worker from Moravia. Gabčík was a Slovak blacksmith's son. Neither had commanded anything larger than a rifle squad. Their training in Scotland lasted 8 months: sabotage, shooting, close combat. They were not assassins by trade. They were infantrymen asked to do an intelligence officer's job. On the night of December 28, 1941, their Halifax bomber flew into heavy cloud over Czechoslovakia. The navigator miscalculated. They jumped nearly 200 miles from the intended landing site. Instead of Prague, they landed near Pilsen. One container of equipment was never recovered. They buried their parachutes, contacted the local resistance, and began a slow, cautious journey toward the capital. For 4 months, they lived in safe houses, waiting for Heydrich's schedule to become predictable. Here's an overlooked human detail. Gabčík and Kubiš were bored. Months of hiding in cramped apartments, eating cold food, speaking in whispers. They watched Heydrich's open-top Mercedes drive past the same hairpin turn in the Troja district almost every day. The turn forced the car to slow to walking speed. They chose May 27, 1942. Gabčík would step into the road with a Stenz submachine gun. Kubiš would throw a modified anti-tank grenade. Neither man had ever killed anyone before. At 10:30 a.m., Heydrich's green Mercedes approached. Gabčík stepped out, raised the Sten, and pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. The gun jammed. That jamming is often treated as bad luck, but the Sten was a cheap, mass-produced weapon, known to misfire if the magazine was overfilled. Gabčík had loaded 32 rounds into a 30-round magazine. A tiny error. Seconds matter. Heydrich stood up in the car and drew his pistol instead of ordering his driver to accelerate. Kubiš threw his grenade. It missed the car but detonated against the rear wheel well. Shrapnel tore into Heydrich's lower back but also into Kubiš's own face. Both assassins fled on bicycles, a detail that sounds almost absurd, but that's what they had. They ditched the bikes in a church cemetery and disappeared into the resistance network. Heydrich was taken to a hospital. For a week, he seemed to recover. Then, his temperature spiked. The grenade had pushed fragments of horsehair upholstery and rust into the wound. There was no penicillin. That was scarce on the Eastern Front. He died of sepsis on June 4th. The Nazi retaliation was swift and, honestly, arithmetic. Hitler wanted 10,000 dead. Himmler talked him down to what he called reasonable reprisals. The village of Litis was destroyed on June 10th. All adult men were executed, women were sent to Ravensbrück, children were dispersed, some to German families, others to gas vans. The total dead from reprisals was over 1,300 Czechs. But here is the counterintuitive outcome. Before Anthropoid, Czech collaboration with the occupation was widespread. After Litis, that changed. The assassination and the massacre convinced ordinary Czechs that neutrality was no longer possible. Resistance cells multiplied. The intelligence flow to London increased. Sabotage of Czech factories producing German arms became, well, routine. The human limit for Gabčík and Kubiš was not courage. They had that in excess. It was exhaustion. For 3 weeks after the assassination, they hid in the crypt of St. Cyril and Methodius Cathedral in Prague. 7 men in a stone room built for one, with little food, stale water, and the knowledge that betrayal was only a matter of time. They were betrayed by a fellow parachutist, Karel Čurda, who took the 1 million Reichsmark reward. On June 18th, 800 SS soldiers surrounded the church. The paratroopers fought for 4 hours with pistols against machine guns. One by one, they ran out of ammunition. They did not surrender. The last 3, including Kubiš and Gabčík, died in the crypt with their own grenades. Operation Anthropoid is often taught as a heroic failure. 2 men who killed a monster and paid the price. But the deeper lesson is about unintended consequences. A jammed submachine gun, a misloaded magazine, a driver who froze instead of accelerating. These small, very human errors shaped the course of a war, not any grand strategy. The planners in London had written off the mission. The men on the ground found a way anyway. And the real shift in Czech resistance came not from the assassination itself, but from the brutal overreaction that followed. Tyranny often defeats itself by punishing the innocent too harshly. That is a lesson that applies to every conflict, then and now. Subscribe to War Machiner and share this if you value history that goes deeper.